Incendies. The story begins after the death of Nawal Marwan, a Canadian immigrant mother who leaves behind 2 sealed envelopes for her twin children, Jeannie and Simon. One for the father they believed was dead, and one for a brother they never even knew existed. Confused and emotionally shaken, Jean decides to travel to the Middle East, determined to uncover their mother's mysterious past and fulfill her final wish. As Jean follows the trail through a country scarred by religious and civil conflict, she uncovers Nawal's buried history. Nawal was a Christian woman who fell in love with a Muslim refugee, which caused her family to disown her. Her first child, a boy, was taken from her at birth and sent to an orphanage. Years later, in the midst of a brutal war, Nawal was imprisoned and repeatedly tortured by a sadistic interrogator. She was also assaulted. She never knew what happened to the child she lost, and never spoke of it again. Simon, initially skeptical of the entire quest, joins Jean halfway through the journey. Together, they piece together the final, horrific truth. The twist is that the man who raped and tortured Nawal in prison is the one who fathered Jeannie and Simon. And also, he's the very same boy she gave up years ago, which means their brother is their father. Nawal's long-lost son was kidnapped, indoctrinated, and transformed into a weapon of war. He became a brutal torturer known only as Abu Tariq. Without knowing who she was, he raped his own mother. Years later, from that act of violence, Jean and Simon were born. Nawal eventually learned the truth and was shattered by it. That's why she remained silent for years, only choosing to reveal everything after her death, because the truth was unbearable in life. Old boy, Dai Su, an ordinary man, is kidnapped and held in a private prison for 15 years without knowing who did it or why. One day, he's suddenly released. Dai Su embarks on a relentless quest to find his captor and get revenge. Along the way, he meets and falls in love with a young woman named Mido, who helps him piece the mystery together. As he digs deeper, he discovers that his imprisonment was orchestrated by a wealthy man named Li Wujin. But Wujin doesn't stop him. He wants Dai Su to find the truth. Twist. The devastating one. Dai Su's revenge mission was never about getting answers. It was a trap. Years ago, Dai Su had unknowingly witnessed Wujin having an incestuous relationship with his sister. He spread the rumor, which led to her suicide. To punish Dai Su, Wujin imprisoned him and meticulously manipulated his life after release, including arranging for him to fall in love with Mido, who turns out to be his own daughter. Dai Su was unknowingly seduced into committing incest, just as Wujin had, completing the cycle of revenge. In the final scenes, Wujin reveals everything through a photo album showing Mido's life from childhood to adulthood. Dai Su flips the pages in horror, realizing the full scope of what's happened. Broken and devastated, he begs Wujin to keep the secret from Mido, even mutilating himself in desperation. Jess boards a mysterious yacht called the Aeolus after a storm capsizes the boat she was sailing on with friends. At first, it feels like they've been rescued, but soon the group starts getting killed off one by one. As Jess explores the ship, she realizes something deeply unsettling. There's another version of herself already on board. This is where the twist begins to unravel. Jess is stuck in a time loop, and the ship resets itself every time the loop completes. But unlike traditional time loops, she doesn't retain perfect memory of the previous cycles. Each version of herself tries to stop the killings, but inevitably becomes the cause of them, thinking she's doing the right thing. Even darker is that she ends up becoming the masked killer that attacked her group earlier in the loop. The film cleverly shows how Jess becomes more violent and desperate with each cycle, trying to change the outcome. She throws bodies overboard, only to see dozens of identical corpses piled on a lower deck, evidence of the countless loops she's been through. And the final twist? After seemingly escaping the ship and returning home, Jess finds another version of herself at home, treating her autistic son coldly, the same behavior she wanted to undo. Jess kills this version of herself, takes her place, and tries to reset everything. But fate isn't kind. When she tries to escape with her son in a car, they crash. Her son dies. She ends up back at the harbor, where her friend offers her a spot on a boat, the same doomed trip she took earlier. The loop begins again. Predestination. The film follows a temporal agent who travels through time trying to stop a terrorist known as the Fizzle Bomber. Along the way, he recruits a mysterious individual known as the Unmarried Mother, who shares a bizarre life story. Born female, named Jane, raised in an orphanage, later joined a space program, fell in love with a mysterious man, got pregnant, and then, during childbirth, learned she was intersex and had to undergo surgery to become male. The baby was stolen. Jane, now living as John, never saw the child again. The agent then offers John a chance to take revenge on the man who ruined his life. But here's where it gets wild. The man John is sent to kill, the one who got Jane pregnant, is actually John himself. Yes, he fell in love with and impregnated his past self. The baby that Jane gave birth to? That's also Jane or John, a younger version of themselves, taken back in time and placed in the orphanage. So Jane/John is their own mother, father, and child. The agent trying to recruit and help John? That's also John in the future after. Multiple time jumps and missions. The terrorist they've been hunting, the Fizzle bomber, is, again, John, an even older version, corrupted over time. So the same person is the hero, the villain, the victim, the lover, and the child. It's a closed loop, one person creating themselves through time, with no beginning and no end. In short, predestination is the ultimate identity twist. I am the beginning. I am the end. The Man from Earth. John Oldman, a university professor, suddenly decides to leave his job and move away. His close academic friends gather at his cabin to give him a farewell. But as the conversation flows, John casually reveals something unbelievable. He's 14,000 years old. At first, they laugh it off as a joke, but John speaks with such detail and calm logic that doubt creeps in. He claims he's been alive since prehistoric times, never aging beyond 35. He's watched civilizations rise and fall, met historical figures, learned countless languages, and constantly moved to avoid suspicion. As his friends challenge him with science, history, religion, and psychology, John calmly answers each question with plausible, mind-bending stories. The tension builds until he drops his most shocking revelation. John claims that, at one point in history, he lived in the region now known as the Middle East. He taught spiritual lessons and gathered a small following. Over time, his words were misunderstood, exaggerated, and mythologized, until people began calling him Jesus. The room falls silent. Some of his friends are deeply shaken, especially a devout Christian woman. One storms out. Another accuses him of cruelty. Eventually, John says it was all a thought experiment, a joke to make them think. And he's writing a novel based on this story. Everyone relaxes a bit and bid their farewell and leave. But here's the final twist. As everyone leaves, John's oldest colleague, a retired professor, realizes that he mentioned something that only his father would know. And he realized not only what John said was true, but John was also his father, who he thought left him early age. Malignant. Madison, a woman in an abusive relationship, begins experiencing terrifying visions of people being murdered, only to realize these killings are actually happening in real life. The killer, a dark, contorted figure named Gabriel, seems almost supernatural, able to manipulate electricity and move with inhuman agility. As the body count rises, Madison learns that she was adopted and has a mysterious past linked to a now-abandoned psychiatric hospital. Gabriel is somehow connected to her early life, but the truth is more shocking than anyone expects. The twist? Gabriel isn't a ghost, a demon, or a hallucination. He's Madison's parasitic twin, a literal living being attached to the back of her head and body since birth. As a child, doctors surgically removed most of Gabriel, but he survived, his brain still fused with Madison's. After years of dormancy, he reawakens, especially after Madison suffers a blow to the head during a violent attack from her husband. Gabriel starts taking control of her body, moving her backward while using her body to commit murders, hence the strange way he moves and kills. The final kicker? All the murders Madison sees are happening through her own eyes because Gabriel is using her body to do them. She's the killer, but she didn't even know it. The Babadook. Amelia is a widowed mother struggling to raise her hyperactive and emotionally disturbed son, Samuel. Her husband died in a car crash while driving her to the hospital to give birth to him. The trauma of his death, combined with the stress of single parenthood, has left her exhausted and emotionally numb. One night, Samuel finds a strange pop-up book called Mr. Babadook. It's dark, eerie, and seems to know far too much about their lives. After reading it, Samuel becomes convinced that the Babadook is real and trying to harm them. Soon, Amelia begins experiencing terrifying visions and hallucinations. The Babadook appears to invade their home, tapping, lurking, whispering, and begins driving her toward madness. The twist. The Babadook isn't a literal monster. It's a manifestation of Amelia's repressed grief, rage, and trauma. The more she denies her pain, the stronger the Babadook becomes. It feeds off her emotional suppression and her descent into violence. Nearly hurting Samuel is a result of this psychological breakdown. Once she acknowledges her grief and fear instead of suppressing it, she gains control over the entity. She doesn't destroy the Babadook. Instead, she feeds it and keeps it in the basement, like a dangerous but manageable part of herself. Don't breathe. 3 young burglars, Rocky, Alex, and Money, target the home of a blind Gulf War veteran who's rumored to be sitting on a massive cash settlement after her daughter was killed in a car accident. They think it'll be a quick, low-risk job. Once inside, though, they discover the man, known only as the Blind Man, is anything but helpless. He locks them inside, kills one of them, and begins hunting the others down in total darkness, on his own terms. At first, it feels like a cat-and-mouse survival thriller. But then, the twist? While hiding in the basement, the remaining two thieves discover a woman tied up. She's the one who accidentally killed the blind man's daughter in a car accident. He kidnapped her and kept her alive because he wanted to force her to bear him another child. After the woman dies in the chaos, the blind man turns his attention to Rocky. He overpowers her and prepares to impregnate her using a turkey baster. Yes, it's as horrifying as it sounds, believing it's the only way to replace his daughter. Luckily, she escapes before he succeeds. Despite everything, the blind man survives, and later the news reports him as a victim of a failed robbery, never revealing what was really in his basement. The Descent. Sarah joins a group of female friends on a spelunking adventure a year after her husband and daughter died in a tragic car crash. They descend into an unexplored cave system deep in the Appalachian Mountains. At first, it's tight spaces and anxiety, but then things get much worse. They become trapped. Tunnels collapse, and they're not alone. The group is hunted by terrifying, pale, humanoid creatures called crawlers, who live in the dark and feast on anything that moves. One by one, the women are picked off. Sarah, driven by grief and rage, transforms into a survivor, fighting back brutally. After seemingly escaping, Sarah climbs out of the cave and drives away. The twist? Suddenly, she wakes up still inside the cave. The escape was just a hallucination, a final flicker of hope before her mind breaks. In reality, Sarah is still trapped, alone, injured, and surrounded by darkness. She sees a vision of her daughter holding a birthday cake, but it's all in her head. The last shot pulls away as Sarah sits in the dock, smiling as the crawlers close in. She never escaped. The US version cuts out this final twist and ends with Sarah escaping, leaving the audience with a more hopeful but less impactful conclusion.